Hey guys, it's Barrett with the Gimpy Camper. So I recently told you how we restored and updated a 4Runner that my grandfather bought new 25 years ago. In this video, we're going to show you a complete makeover of my wife's Honda Pilot. Now truthfully, this was just the first project in a string to complete the remodel on my truck. Now I'm talking paint, I'm talking off-road bumpers, new step bars. Those step bars are going to have bed access steps, a roof rack, some lighting. However, I don't want to start with the most expensive vehicle I own. So my wife actually has a freeze-dried candy business here in Tennessee. She was looking for something to transport her candy and storefront setup to different venues, as she has been using my truck. Well, we were originally looking at just a very small 4x6 trailer that she could pull behind her Kia Optima. However, the problem with all of these small trailers is that people think they're made out of gold. And apparently these 4x6 trailers are around $2,000 for anything decent. I mean, I was still planning on giving it a paint job, but I just couldn't spend that much on a trailer. So I began looking at options for cars, and after, perusing through Facebook Marketplace for a while and not really finding a whole lot there, I had a friend that helped me bid on some cars through a salvage auction. I ended up getting this whole car for the price of one of these trailers without the fees. I had to pay the fees, of course. But in this video, we're going to do more of an overview of what we did to the Honda, but then when we get to the truck, I'm going to do more of a detailed step-by-step how-to style series of videos. Now remember, I'm no expert on this, and this is the first time that I've ever done a full Raptor paint job on a whole car. That being said, I did learn some lessons, and we will go through those today because I'm always honest with you. Now before we get too far into this video, I want to mention the sponsor of this video, which is Velocitint. I actually ran across this company when doing some research for this project. They provide tints so that you can make your Raptor Liner, and you got to get the tintable version of the Raptor Liner, but you can make your Raptor Liner whatever color you want. Now there are two different Raptor Liner kits, which you'll see both of those down in the description below. You have the standard black kit, and then you have a kit that's tintable. Those are two very different things, and you got to be very careful. And you got to be very careful when you're spraying, because I did try to open a tintable once, and I looked at it and it was black, so that was a mistake. So we will discuss this further in a minute when we talk about the painting. But if you choose the tintable kit, you can make it almost any color you want. A lot of people do go with a color similar to their original car color, because it cuts down a lot on the work. A lot. But, the reason is because you got to paint the door jambs and everything to match, and it's a lot of work. Now, I wanted this car to match my wife's business colors, and it was hard to pick a color just based on a picture. To be honest, you can use about any paint tint in this stuff, but you have to make sure that it doesn't have binders because it decreases the strength. Now, I was looking at eBay, and I found this Velocitint site, and they had sample cards that are actually sprayed in the bed liner. To me, that meant a lot. So they aren't very expensive either. The samples are $5.99, but if you buy more, the more you buy, the cheaper they are. Now you can get all 120 of their colors for $99, but that's probably a bit much for most people. I would recommend looking at their pictures, and that's what I did. I got like every one that was around the color that I wanted, and I ordered that. The more you buy, the more of a discount you get. So if you buy 4, you get 65% off, but if you buy 10, you get 80% off. So, I would recommend ordering a lot of these colors that you're thinking about. And like I say, when you look at their website, it's got pictures of all the similar colors together, so it makes it pretty easy for you to pick those out. Now, I went ahead and ordered like 4 or 5 for the car and 4 or 5 for the truck. Now, I will say that when Velocitint accepted my offer to sponsor this video, they did send me some additional sample colors too, and I'm pretty thankful for that. Also, I want to say that this tint is also cheaper than the tint that Raptor Liner kind of endorses. And it comes in these convenient pouches. Like, all you do is get 1 pouch per bottle of tintable Raptor. And so I decided to go with 8 cobalt blue metallics. I only ended up needing 7, and 2 yellows, which turned out to be the perfect amount. I had one of the blue pouches, like I say, left over after I sprayed as well. Now their pouches are $21.99, but like I said, on Amazon the others are $29.22 right now. But wait, there's more. If you buy 4 or more, you get 20% off. And if you happen to need 16, you can get 25% off. So I've been very happy with my experience with Velocitint, and I have also ran across other positive reviews on some Facebook groups that I'm in. So another thing that they have, you know, a lot of people say that whenever you turn your bottles upside down and you go back and kind of consolidate them together, you can get quite a bit more product. Well, they took that to the next level, and they have these things called bottle link adapters. And what they do is essentially it's a union where you can just put 2 of the bottles together, stand them up, one bottle just drains directly into the other bottle. And I found that this was very helpful. It gave me just the right amount I needed once to finish up a coat that I thought I was going to have to open another bottle for, just to do a little bit of an area. And the problem with that is that paint's only good for about an hour, and you got to wait about an hour for the coat to dry, if it's not like real hot like it was whenever I did it. But it really only took like 30 minutes. But essentially that puts a lot of stress on you, and that just saved me a lot just by being able to unscrew that, put it back on the gun, and finish up the small area that I needed to finish up. Now, my first lesson when coming to this car from the 4Runner project that we recently did, for those of you that don't know, I also recently updated a 3rd gen 4Runner that my grandfather originally bought new 25 years ago. Now, during that project, which I'll put a link to that video up in the corner and down in the description, but during that I painted the fender flares, the bumpers, the rocker panels, all with black Raptor bed liner. Now what I did is I taped off the painted areas of the car that I didn't want to put Raptor liner on, and I just made a tape line, covered it with plastic. Well, then when I peeled it off, it left a very small area that could be seen. Granted, the rubber seal on those fender flares wasn't black, it was more of a silver color, and that's what I was able to see. That's the only area that I had that happen to, but it taught me a valuable lesson, and that's to take off any parts that you can whenever you're painting with this stuff. So as far as the Honda goes, let's start at the beginning. I will place chapters in this video so you can go quickly to any section that you want to see. The first thing that I had to do was I had to drive down to Atlanta to get the car from the auction company. Now, this is the first look that I really had at the car because I did an online auction. And to be honest, it's in pretty good condition for a totaled car. I knew before I went that I would need a new front bumper cover, and that I would have to fix the airbag in the steering wheel that had popped open. Now, after inspecting it further, the engine did turn on and the air conditioner was cold, which was a plus. It didn't take me long to figure out that I would also have to replace the hood. Now, the hood had like a pretty dramatic dent in it. It couldn't really be fixed. I actually thought about fixing it with Bondo, but I thought, man, we'll do it right. We'll get a new hood. I also had to replace the driver's seat belt and the airbag control module. I had to send off and get this fixed. And so all of these parts, except for the airbag control module, I actually picked up from somebody off of Facebook Marketplace, took a trip over to Nashville for these used parts. I secured the hood, the front bumper, the seat belt for $500, and my friend who helped me get the car said I should have got them in the same color. But it didn't matter to me because I knew it wasn't going to stay the same color. I don't think he liked it that much, but that's the way it goes. You know, I'm trying to push the boundaries here. You know, all of these parts went on relatively good without any issue, but I got pretty good at taking the front bumper cover off. This was just the first time that I changed it out. I decided to use the winch on my truck in order to pull the radiator frame just a little bit because there was a gap around the headlight. Now, I had that gap pretty great, but unfortunately the next day I went out and the metal had relaxed and it kind of went back in the same position. So I ended up taking it off again right before I painted it, and I pulled it out again. However, this time when I was pulling it out, I think that I pulled it maybe a little too far, because now there's a gap behind the headlight, and there's a little bit of gap right behind the bumper cover. All in all, it's not that bad. This is an old work car. It's driving my OCD crazy, but unless you know it's there, unless 4 million people watch this video, nobody will ever know it's there but me, I don't think. Alright, so the next step is to wash the car. So I actually washed it with some dish detergent because I didn't care that it was going to strip the wax. I was going to have to strip the wax anyway. Then I went over the whole car with degreaser. A lot of people use acetone. I actually ended up using Purple Power that I didn't dilute at all. I used it at 100% strength. Then I stripped the car down. I removed the front bumper again, the rear bumper, the inner door panels, all the weather seals around the doors, the window seals, the rocker panel covers, the headlights, the tail lights, the side marker lights, the upper brake light cover, all the badges, all the trim, all the panels inside the back hatch, the air shocks that hold the back hatch up, the bezel cluster off the hatch, which included the emblem on the back hatch, and the reverse lights, which was a nightmare because I couldn't figure out how those things came apart. But I finally got there. And then I began taping. The driver's window was stuck in the upright position, and I believe it's because the car didn't like me unplugging about every connector that it had. And so it was kind of stuck, and I just went ahead and decided to tape it off and paint it that way. And truthfully, it was a lot easier than removing the window seals, which I did on the other three. But I didn't really realize when I was pulling those window seals out that they went all the way down in the channel, because that was horrible to put back, but we'll get into that in a minute. Now I also had the car supported by 2 sets of Harbor Freight 6-ton jack stands. Now I really wanted the 12-ton jack stands because they get about waist high, but truthfully it's a little overkill and they were a lot more expensive. Now these new Harbor Freight jack stands, because everybody's like, oh, don't use Harbor Freight jack stands, because they had some recalls back in the past, but the new ones are redesigned. They have like positive locks. They got like 3 different safety mechanisms. They're fine. Now I also removed the rubber trim around the rear fenders and both of the plastic inner fenders on the front fenders, because this was mainly for one reason. Almost every video review that I watched for long-term reviews of these Raptor Liner paint jobs said that there was a failure and like some chipping in the fenders, and they all believed that it was because that it wasn't prepped well. So I thought if I get everything that's touching it off and get a good coat of paint on there, it's probably going to have a lot better shot. And then I did more than just take the bumpers off. I actually took the bumpers in all the different pieces. You know, the front grill's attached to the front bumper. I took it off because we decided to do more of a 2-tone black and blue paint job on this. And so the grill I painted black. A lot of the trims around the bottom of the bumpers I painted black. The other thing that I want to add here is that I learned that before you take any of the interior trims of the door panels off, it's a really good idea to take a lot of pictures of where exactly those trims cover, because it's pretty hard to remember where they cover versus where they don't. So that can save you a lot of material. And then in like the rubber door seals and stuff, I couldn't remember if you saw a stripe of paint there or not. And it really would have saved me a lot of pain in the long run of things. To the point I was actually watching like YouTube reviews of Honda Pilots and like zooming in on pictures, screenshots I took trying to see what sections were covered and what weren't. So now I began taping and masking off the areas that I didn't want to paint. So for the most part, all the taping, I just used regular blue painter's tape. But if it was an area that I needed a really good paint line, I used the frog tape. So I lined around the windshields and the windows and all that stuff that was still in the way with just the regular painter's tape. And then I took some plastic. I cut the plastic down to size. I got this special plastic off of Amazon that's for painting. It actually has a coating on one side where the paint sticks to it so it doesn't like run down on your car or anything. And I really like that plastic. It's been great and it helps keep the mess down. But I covered all the glass with the plastic and then taped that down to the original tape that I had around the outline of the windows. Then I took some painter's tape and that plastic and I put it along the pinch welds and each door where I had removed the weather stripping. So this is obviously so when you paint the car, you don't paint inside the finished area of the car that you don't want to be painted. So lastly, with the plastic, what I did is I wrapped some around each wheel hub and just ran some tape around it just to hold it on there. Now in hindsight, I wish I would have, taped off the fender well areas a little bit more, because I did have a little bit of overspray there, mainly with the yellow. But all in all, I'm pretty happy with it. Now, because I wanted this to look as professional as possible, I also went through and I placed painter's tape over all of the factory stickers and the VIN labels, and then I used a razor blade to cut out an outline around the stickers and try to make it as clean as possible. It actually wasn't that bad. As long as you really pressed down on that tape, you could see the outline of the label underneath. If I couldn't remove something easily, I also went ahead and just taped it up, like the catches for the door latches. I just taped around them, and that seemed to work pretty well. Didn't leave any big issues. So the next step was to sand. Now, I say sand lightly because actually what we did wasn't sanding, and that we went the direction that a lot of people do, because sanding seems to be the harder way to do this. Essentially, you just want to remove the clear coat off the car. You're not trying to remove all the paint off the car. You don't want to take it all the way down to the metal. You just want to remove the clear coat. So a lot of people that I'm in with some Facebook groups, they let me in on a little secret. By the way, if you are even thinking about taking on a project like this, I highly recommend the Facebook group called Raptor Liner Coated Vehicles. Anyway, they say the best way to do this is to use a red filament brush. Now, I bought 2 sets of these off of Amazon, which I will have a link in the description below. The first was a 6-inch brush that I have attached to a cheap polisher sander that I actually bought off a return table at Harbor Freight. Now, it worked great for this, and I only spent $20 on it, but the full price of that sander is about $40, but it was on the return table. I also bought a pack of smaller red filament brushes, which I put in the drill to get into those more intricate areas. I will say that I picked a week that was way too hot to do any of this stuff, but I got it done. Now we'll put the 6-inch cup brush on that polisher sander, and I was able to sand 90% of this car in about 30 minutes. But that last 10%, it took a long time. I used those smaller cut brushes mainly on the drill to go around the inner parts of the doors and all around the door jamb. If you couldn't fit the brushes in there, if you just use the red scrub brush that's got pretty texture on there, that'll help a lot too. But try to use that filament brush anywhere where you can reach it. The little kit that I had some with that were more pointed and stuff. I got to most everything with it. So I also went ahead and took off the shocks to the rear hatch. I was using a board to hold it up by propping it up between the hatch and the concrete on the ground. And this allowed me to get into a lot of those edges around the hatch to get those done as well. Now those smaller brushes really came in handy too when I did the alloy wheels, because we decided we were just going to paint the wheels. My wife didn't really like the shininess of them, and as long as they're not chrome, you can do this. If they're chrome, anything that's chrome, you really have to sandblast and get all that chrome off there before you can do anything, and it'll stick. Because if you spray this stuff on chrome, it's just going to flake right off. So don't do that. But yeah, we were able to use these filament brushes. I went over the wheels and everything. We decided to not do the center caps. We kept going back and forth about it. I actually think it turned out pretty well, leaving the center caps. I ran across some comments on Facebook or I guess it was Reddit, where somebody really didn't like that because I was just looking at different options with it. But anyway, I will say that we did the wheels we followed the directions of a video that Raptor has on their website about how to do wheels. So I will say that just like it showed on a video that I watched, you can actually go over those tape lines that you have with the red filament brush, and it usually doesn't even hurt anything. Actually, the only issue that I had, granted I was being pretty easy around the tape lines, but if the brush was spinning and it was at the edge of a piece of tape and it went against the tape, sometimes it would try to peel it up, but it didn't tear through it at all. And I went over that stuff a couple of times. I really think it's some kind of witchcraft, but hey, it works great. Don't complain about it, right? Now remember, the goal is not to remove all the paint. It's just to scratch the surface. Also, for any area, like I say, that you can't get into with that filament brush, you can use a red scuffing pad. Then in any areas that you're greatly concerned about, you can spray it with Raptor's adhesion promoter. You need to do that with any plastics too, by the way. But just you spray that on a few minutes before you spray the Raptor. Now the last step in the preparation phase was to use small strips of 1-inch painter's tape to go around each wheel. So you put the tape strips on the tire and you go all the way around, and then you get some plastic and you tape it down to that tape. Now we went over these wheels and the entire car with degreaser again after we had everything scuffed down. I do want to say that I didn't wear a respirator because I was outside, but let me tell you, this stuff is strong, and I did pick one up for my next project and I'm going to use it for that. And so please do your lungs a favor and wear a mask or a respirator. So next we move on to the primer. Now some people think you're just wasting your time and you don't need to do this. Actually, let's just go ahead and touch on the options here that I ran across in my research. Number one, you have people that just do the sanding and go over any bare metal areas with acid etch primer. Number two, you have people who sand and use the etch primer and then thin down some of the Raptor and spray the whole car with an HVLP gun. That's called a seal coat. Essentially does the same thing. Or three, the option that I went with was to use an HVLP to shoot the Raptor epoxy primer over the entire car. Now I feel like the epoxy primer is the best option because it gets you all the benefits of the seal coat, but you get a good base. I will say that it's probably the most expensive option as well, as 1 gallon of Raptor epoxy primer off Amazon is about $150. Now that being said, I ordered a second because I wasn't sure that I was going to have enough. Now in actuality it took less than a half of a gallon. But my big problem was from Amazon. Now these apparently aren't packaged very well, and they sent both of them together and they were both unsealed and leaking all over my concrete out of the box on my patio. Now I think it was from them just throwing it down at delivery because one of them still was mostly full. But it's just permanently stained my concrete patio. Now I will say that Amazon refunded my money for both of these gallons of primer, but they did not cover my damages or anything like that and act like I was being a little bit irrational, but they did give me the money back. I think they should have refunded everything in the box, which I actually thought they did until I looked. There was another Raptor kit in there that they didn't refund. Now, unfortunately, the only other option to really get this stuff for a lot of people is to get it from O'Reilly, because O'Reilly can get it. They keep it at their warehouse apparently, so they can usually have it the next day. But with that, I will say that it's quite a bit more expensive as well. But you can tell if you read the Amazon reviews that this happens a lot. So I don't know why they keep doing it. Now, one of the things that I really like about the Raptor primer though is that it dries fast. I did do 2 coats with the HVLP gun, which by the way, I also got a cheap gun from Harbor Freight to do the primer, and that wasn't the problem. But the problem was I also got another great buy off the return table, and I decided to do this at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I had a lot of problems out of the trigger mechanism on that gun. So after I finally got that to working and got everything done, I did, however, have to drill the tip out to 2 millimeters as well, and there's plenty of videos showing you how to do that on YouTube as well. But after I got all that done, I was like, I'm not using this gun anymore, and I threw it in the trash because it just wasn't working. Now those guns are only like $15 to start with. I should have just got one at full price, which is what I ended up doing when I went back to get one for the door jambs, which we'll get into in a minute. Now, one reason that I did this stuff at night was because it took me that long to get ready, but the other reason was because everybody kept saying when it's real hot in the middle of summer, it's best to do it at night if the humidity's not crazy high, which is pretty high here, but I didn't have any issues with that. Now, the other thing that I really love about the epoxy primer is that after you put it on, you can coat over the top of it between 1 hour from the time you spray it to 7 days without having to re-scuff the surface again. Let me say that again. After you put the primer down, in 1 hour you can put the Raptor on top of it, and if you don't do it then, you have up to 7 days before you have to scuff that surface up on the car again. So gives you a 1 hour to 7 day window that you can just go in and just paint the heck out of it. Now the same night that I did the primer, I also went through and I painted the area where I wanted the yellow stripe. Now I will say that doing this at night, I couldn't tell that it didn't cover the best, so I did have to go back and coat this again at the end of the project as well. But also on the same night, I went through and I did the black Raptor liner over all of the black trim pieces as well. And those were the pieces, like I said, from the black pieces off the bumper, the front grille, the rocker panel covers, the splash shields, the wheels. I got all that stuff taken care of. I did 2 full coats on all of that stuff and then a drop coat. And then I removed the plastic and tape around the wheels that night as well. Because like I said, you always want to remove the tape while the Raptor's wet. I also had the variable gun then, but I didn't want to use it. So I just used the standard gun for the black. And so I shot it with a pressure of 60 at 12 to 18 inches. So it's a little heavy on the texture. It's not like really textured, but it's a lot heavier than the blue part of the car. So the 2 full coats I did about 45 minutes apart, and then about 45 minutes after that, I let it get dry to the touch, and then I went over it with that dust coat, which like I said before, the dust coat was, you stand 2 or 3 feet away and you just do a swirling motion. So I went over all of that with the black. And I did these 3 coats with the yellow as well, but like I said, it didn't cover it that well then. And so we did have to go back and do it again, which we'll get to in a minute. So then I went back the next day and I taped off the yellow stripe. Now I used some frog tape around the edges of this because I wanted to just make these lines as clean as possible. And I decided that I wanted to leave a little gap in the yellow on the back to make it appear to be like more sporty. So I matched the angle at the piece of trim in the back, and I used a 2-inch piece of tape just for a spacer there. And I taped all the way around that 2-inch piece of tape. So then when I removed that piece of tape out of the center, it was a yellow, is in the yellow stripe, but whenever I sprayed it blue, that part was going to stay blue. And so then I decided to do the same thing just a little bit in front of that, and I used a 1-inch piece of tape for the spacer. That way I would have a thick blue line in the back and a little bit thinner blue line in the front, just to split that yellow up and make it look a little bit more sporty. And I actually think that turned out pretty well. Now I will say, whenever I was spraying this blue, I bought some additional LED lights too, but this blue color was very hard to see at night. So I wasn't sure how actually any of this was laying down. But you know, for the blue, I did use the Raptor Very Professional gun. I unscrewed the tip 2 revolutions, which should give you the finest spray, and then the pressure was set at 60. I also got another Harbor Freight gun and drilled the tip out of that in order to spray the door jambs. And I'm telling you, these door jambs are a lot of work. It would have been easier just to paint it the same color, but I didn't want to do that. So the theory is that sometimes people have problems with their door seals not keeping all the water out if they spray them with any texture at all. And so while some people do go ahead and spray Raptor over the entire car with the HVLP, that way supposedly it's not as strong because the coat's a lot thinner. So now what I decided to do is use the Very nozzle for the whole outside of the body and use the HVLP just for the door jambs because they don't have to be as strong. Now truthfully, I figured if I was able to keep the texture down, then it probably would have been fine on the door jambs too. But I wanted to do it right, and I wanted to make sure I knew what I was doing so that when I do my truck the right way, that I don't have any issues. So I probably will do the door jambs. Now, looking back at it, I'll probably do the door jambs first and let those dry, and then come back and do the paint on the outside of the body whenever I do the truck. All right, so let's talk about the tintable color before we go any further. So Raptor has a video on this on their website. And that's mainly what I used for as a guide. So like I said earlier when I was talking about the Velocitint, I took their advice and I mixed it outside the bottle, which they say gives you a more consistent color. The recommendation is that you shake the Raptor Liner bottle, shake the tintable bottle up, pour it into the mixing bowl, and then get the hardener, put it in the measuring cup, get the right amount, put that in the Raptor bottle, put the lid on, shake it up, that thins all that extra residue that's left, dump it out in the pot, then mix it up a little bit, then add your color. So I used the Velocitint, so I just got one pouch for each one, dumped it in there, use a stir stick to stir that up real good, and then dumped it right back into the Raptor bottle so you could put it on the gun and spray it. Now in the event that you're going to use an HVLP gun, you can thin this Raptor mixture down by up to 15% with a urethane reducer. You know, my brain started really hurting in the middle of the night when I was trying to do this, and the math wasn't making much sense to me, and it ended up being a lot more than what I thought it should be. I ended up using 1 ounce of reducer to each batch of the Raptor, which seemed to be fine. They really say it's best to do it by weight, but I used 1 ounce, and it actually seemed like it sprayed like way too fast out of the gun. I'm wondering if the gun even had to be opened up at all and drilled out, because I was going through a lot of material. But after I got all that figured out, I started by spraying the roof. Now, it's a good idea with this stuff to spray it in one direction, so spray it like lengthwise to start with, and then on the next coat, spray it perpendicular, so like widthwise the next time. So, and then sometimes they say like at a 45-degree angle. But after spraying the roof and the hood and the hatch, I moved over to the sides. And after I painted the sides, then I went ahead and thinned some of that product down and used the HVLP. And as I said earlier, in the future, I'll probably start with the door jambs. I'll actually probably do them ahead of time and let them dry before I actually do the outside of the car. Now, I sprayed all the edges around the door jambs and the edges of the door just the best as I could. You know, some areas like where it's in there where the door hinges and stuff are, it is more like a spray and pray approach. You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. It's trying to get it in there, cover as good as I can. And I didn't really see any areas that didn't get covered, to tell the truth. Now, about the time I got the door jambs done, the top of the car was dry to the touch, so I just went back and started laying it down, the second coat on top of the car in the perpendicular direction, like I said before. And I went over the entire car again and did decide to spray the bottom side of the hood. Now with this, I didn't fully prep it, so I didn't sand it. I was actually afraid that I wouldn't have enough material, so it may peel off. I don't have that high hope for it, but I saw I was going to have plenty of material, so I went ahead and sprayed it. Now there's also one spot on that bottom of the hood that actually touched the plastic the way I had the plastic done, so it peeled off immediately the next day. Now after I did that second coat, I waited a few minutes, then I hit it with a dust coat, which again is that swirling motion that I keep talking about from a few feet away. As soon as this dust coat finished, I went ahead and started pulling all the tape while the Raptor was still wet. And I will say that my hands were blue for like 3 days, and so try to wear gloves. It's hard to pull that tape when you're doing that, but I mean, I had to go to work and I have a professional job, and I should look like a slob because my hands were like completely blue. Now after we pulled the tape, then I will say that this is when we decided to pull the car into the carport, as it's supposed to rain, and I had to return to the work the next day, so I didn't want to hurt the Raptor, and I didn't have the weather seals and stuff. But this is actually when we decided to catch the car on fire. Well, we didn't decide to, but it did. Yeah, you heard me. We caught the car on fire. Now I saw a little bit of smoke and I thought, is that smoke? And I was like, no, that's exhaust out of the car. And then I saw a flame at the back of the car. The funny thing was I was yelling at my wife like, turn the car off. But that didn't help because she turned the car off, but she was still holding the brake. And apparently the fire was a piece of tape that was covering the third brake light bulb. And so the piece of tape had caught on fire because the light was turned on, and it was still on because she was holding the brake, obviously. But after putting out the fire, we got her moved into the carport there. It was an interesting night. Then after working a few days, I was able to go back and get the car reassembled. They say it's best if you can wait at least 72 hours to reassemble the parts. A lot of the videos that I watched did say that they had like some issues where the Raptor had chipped off and stuff from trying to put the parts on too soon. So I know it's very exciting. You want to get those parts on, but try your darndest to wait a few days before you do. That Raptor actually takes like a month to like fully cure. So, but they say after 72 hours, you should be pretty good as far as the working strength on it. Now the reassembly did take me a few days just from the sheer amount of things that I had taken off of the car. Now the worst part, like I said earlier, was getting those window sills back in though. Man, I'm telling you, I'm going to leave those in on the truck because that was just too much. In order to get them back in, I had to loosen all the window tracks, and I had to shimmy the windows around, and I didn't have to take the glass all the way out, which I thought I was going to have to, but it was an ordeal to get those window sills back in the track, like underneath the door, because it has to be on that whole leading edge of the window. Alright, so then I got the rocker panel covers and the splash guards back on, and lastly the door sills. Now the door sills clip in with these little plastic clips, and I was actually planning on buying new door sills, but apparently they're really proud of those new door sills. And if you go to the auto parts store and try to like look at any, they just try to sell you the generic door seals that don't even fit the car. And so you really want the ones that are made for the car. Now most of those clips broke whenever I took those window seals off. And so I went back on Amazon and I ordered 2 packs. Now unfortunately those 2 packs, they were only about half of what I needed to get all the door seals back on the car, which delayed things a while. I also found that by using some curved needle nose pliers, it was pretty easy to put those clips back into those seals. Essentially, you grabbed it with the curved part, and you could pull it down and stretch the rubber, and it would go right in there. Now, those new seals just clip into place. The top portion of the seals were a little bit harder because they actually fit down into a channel, and you got to walk those all the way down the door, and that takes a little bit of time. And then I also had to loosen the mirrors because a part of those seals kind of fit in behind the bezel on the mirror as well. Then I got me some glue from the auto parts store so I could glue the emblems back on, and I actually surprised my wife and added 2 custom emblems that say candy, since it's for my wife's candy business. She kept joking that I was going to make her car look like a taxi though, so I might have took it too far. Ordered her a taxi light and put some vinyl on there. It says Candy Inspector. She really hated it. I thought it looked nice, but I did get it as a joke, so I can't hold it against her. Now, the last touches that I did is I used the Cricut, the vinyl machine, and I added some vinyl for business that I cut out. And so it has like the business name on the back, freeze-dried candy, and I added some QR codes. I have a white QR code on the back. I have some on the sides that are on a lemon. Now, I'll tell you, those QR codes, they aren't for the faint of heart for weeding all that vinyl out, but they work. Now, one of the last things that I did to finish the build out was to add a carpeted shelf in the back to make it easier for her to carry her supplies. Now, this was really the whole purpose of this car. It wasn't all just a practice for the truck, but you know, the shelf build out ended up being a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. I actually had all these plans, but truthfully, just by cutting a 3/4 inch piece of plywood, putting some carpet on it, it just sat right down on like the armrest for the 3rd row seats in the back and held it up, and that does everything she needs to do. Now she can carry her canopy or tables or wagon and her folding hand truck underneath that shelf, and that stuff can stay there. And she carries her candy in totes, and she can put those on top of the shelf or in the back seat if she needs to. Now, I always tell you guys the problems that I had, so let's go over the problems, because you know, I'm not about just shooting the rainbows. I had some problems here, which is what I expected to do, which is why I did this in the first place. I mean, I did this so she can have it for her business. It was supposed to be a learning process, and it was. So let's go over that. So some things that didn't turn out as planned. So there are a couple areas around the door jambs they got missed. And the issue with that is apparently I had a piece of tape fall on the door jamb on the passenger side. And I also had a piece of tape that I covered the keyhole with on the driver's door. When I pulled that piece of tape off of the keyhole, it left a little, you could see a little bit of that burgundy paint where it had covered it up and didn't let me shoot the paint all the way in there. I'm probably the only person that's ever going to notice that. However, I could not ignore the 1.5 inch piece of tape that was in the passenger door jamb that made me lose my mind. Also, when I was looking at all the different doors in any areas that I missed, I did cover where those door seals clip in. I covered some of those with some tape because I was afraid I was going to get paint on the window, and some of them were a little bit wide, so I took the tape off and I had some areas there. And essentially what I ended up deciding to do was I went over, I sanded a little bit on all these areas, and I had an extra thing of blue. Now, I watched one video that says if you're going to patch this stuff, which is really talking about as you're spraying it, the best way to patch it is to use either a cigarette butt, which a lot of us don't have these days, or use some painter's tape and just twist it and use the end just to like touch the edge, because it'll make a little bit of that texture. But nobody ever says anything about using a brush, and I can tell you why now, because I did use a brush. I mixed up, I had one blue left, and I thought I'll just try to patch these areas. Oh, I had one sticker with the VIN number where I noticed that I forgot to cut it out, and so it had a big burgundy patch around that as well. So anyway, I mixed up the blue, and I got me a little paintbrush, and I went through and I tried to cover these areas. Now that looks horrible, so that's not a recommended job. Now, luckily none of these areas are in high visibility. I also painted the area underneath the hood that I said peeled up initially as well. So after everything dried, I went back and taped off the blue area that was around the yellow, and I resprayed the yellow because I told you that it didn't cover too well. So I did 2 more coats on that. Now where I went wrong with this is that I was in a hurry and I forgot to scuff up the yellow, which had been there a couple of days. So that last coat could flake off a little bit, but at least it's yellow underneath, and I don't think it's going to be too big of an issue, but it is a mistake, and so I'm telling you about it. Now, people often ask how much material that I used when I did this, and so I'm going to tell you I used 9 bottles of Raptor, the tintable Raptor. 7 of it was for blue, and 2 of it was for yellow. And that's not including the one blue that I went and did the patch with, so technically 8 blue. And then I used 3 bottles of black Raptor for the trims and the wheels. I used about a half a gallon of epoxy primer, and I also used about 1.5 cans of adhesion promoter for all those plastic parts and to go over the tape lines wherever I was spraying the Raptor. Then I probably used about a quart of the urethane reducer to both thin and clean the gun. But I also had some acetone that I used, because what you want to do is about every 2 bottles of Raptor you spray, you want to spray something through the gun to clean it out. So I had the acetone on hand, so I was just using that to put through the gun to clean it out real good so that it continued to flow well. And I probably used about 3 rolls of painter's tape and 1 roll of frog tape. So all in all, I'm pretty happy with this project. Let me know what you guys think about what this is and how it turned out. Now, the knowledge I've gained here is very valuable to me with this project moving forward when I go to do the truck. Now, that's the biggest thing for me, is I know what I need to do. I plan on doing an entire series for the truck, like I say, that's going to be more detailed as far as like how to. So hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out if you're interested in this stuff. And once again, I just wanted to say thank you to the sponsor of this video, Velocitant. These products work great here, and I support them all day long. Thanks, guys, and catch us next week.
Do not forget to hit that subscribe button.